in the land of Twitter, some think that Channel 4 Racing's was way more entertaining in the old days, whatever the old days were. What say you?
Yeah, it was much more fun then.
It's just a yawn now.
Well, you need a double act, like, you know.
Well, the thing... So Rish worked for the BBC.
Yes.
Still does, but worked on BBC Racing.
Yeah.
I was working on Channel 4 Racing for the thick end of 10 years before the new contract started.
Yes.
So we're fairly well positioned to judge the output from then until now. And yes, there are changes, but it's not as radically different in terms of the nuts and bolts of presentation than it was. And B, if you read some of this stuff, you'd think it was, somewhere between the Fast Show and Morecambe and Wise before, and now it's like watching the Open University. That's just not true.
The old Channel 4 team and the old BBC team both had their fair share of criticism. The old Channel 4 team were criticised for perhaps not taking racing too seriously.
Seriously
and
enough.
Taking it, and taking the jokes far more seriously.
Yeah.
And the BBC were criticised for showing too much fashion at Royal Ascot or not being sharp enough on their racing. Everybody gets criticism, and whoever's in charge at any particular time has to deal with that. And ultimately, I think criticism makes much more noise than praise. And these days, that's what happens. And because Twitter is a microphone for people to make noise, they do.
Yeah.
And also because it's the only terrestrial show in town now, you're gonna take all the heat. It's fine. It's just part of the job. All we can do is do our best and try our hardest to make as good programs. If you do what you're doing well, then I know it sounds simple, but you're on the right track.
Well, the one thing that I feel a bit, I get irritated by.
Tell me.
Is the fact that people seem to think that we get into television and we're interested in becoming TV celebrities or whatever. So I don't think you are. I don't think I am, certainly. I think people forget that our job is the media. That's the name. We're here to transmit the information, the entertainment that racing puts on for people at home. I think people forget that, and they realise that they sometimes think the problems with the media. The media are only transmitting what the sport is, and sometimes they have to realise that maybe the sport has the problem. I hate to say it because I'm a fan of racing, but the sport might have the problem. And the sooner we realise that is actually the case, then the quicker we might be able to understand
there was
what's wrong.
Good piece in the... Actually, I was quite interested to read in the Racing Post the other day. Martin Cruddas, who is now the boss of ARC, the racecourse group, it said, the question was a very leading question, saying, what would you do about the terminal decline of Channel 4's ratings, or some question like that? And he said, we've got to trust the broadcasters, that they're the people who know how to broadcast. It's up to us to provide the best and most stimulating product we can for them to get their teeth sunk into. We're very lucky. We get to cover brilliant sport on 92 days a year. If you look at network television viewing figures as a whole, insofar as they're any kind of accurate barometer of viewership, and that's a moot point, they are going down across the board because people's viewing habits are changing. Even live events and even live sport viewing habits are changing. And that applies to any sport, essentially, on network television, and any sport on the whole that's not football. Numbers are going down. In that context, ratings numbers have actually held up pretty well. If you were to relativise it to sports like rugby league and snooker and whatever, then the figures are holding up well. So no, I don't think racing's putting on a bad product, and I don't think it's being badly broadcast.
So you disagree?
I'm not saying
you disagree on the product.
No. I just think I agree with Rishi's central point, which is that sometimes when people want to have a moan, they're moaning. If we have a brilliant day's racing, no one moans about the quality of the broadcast. Right. If the product is less than scintillating, then they'll go for the conduit first before the actual product that we're broadcasting.
I think my point is simply the fact that the people who are pointing the fingers at Channel 4, who call themselves racing fans, need to perhaps look at the product that we are transmitting before looking at who's transmitting it.
Agreed.
And just going back to Nick's point about viewing figures, when I worked for the BBC, the viewing figures for Royal Ascot and for the Derby declined. and we were criticised. The BBC were criticised for allowing the viewing figures to decline. Now, those same viewing figures that the BBC were criticised for are now being held up as a barometer for Channel 4's failings and saying, well, what? So, at which point do we decide to say, right? Well, what's the common denominator here?
Also, it's my view that people tune in because they want to watch the sport.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you can talk about viewing figures and analyse them. That's fine. That's everyone's entitled to do that. You can talk about the editorial and say, I think Nick Luck's rubbish and I think Rishi Persad's brilliant, or whatever, or vice versa.
Probably not most people.
But to be fair, but to conflate the two, I think is bogus.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that people tune in to watch presenters. I mean, we've had star-name presenters on this show. We've hired people with, big profile, whatever. There's no correlation between who's doing the show and what the numbers are.
There was
it's what racing is
a
showing.
huge
That's why
article
9
in the
million people
Racing
watch the
Post
Grand
calling
National.
for a certain unnamed presenter on another channel to be given the job at Channel 4 to save the viewing figures. And then in the same article, the same person highlighted all the people that work for the BBC when they were, hang on a second, you've got people that work for the BBC, including their main presenter.
Including you.
Yeah.
And look at all the numbers you've put on.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
To be fair, what would happen if you took me, Claire, and Mick Fitzgerald away?
I mean,
disaster.
I know.
It doesn't matter.
Implode.
But I don't know about you, Vin, but I don't remember
We're talking ourselves
ever
out of a job
watching.
here. You realise that?
What?
I don't ever remember watching a sport and saying I'm watching cricket, football, golf, tennis because of as good as Richie Benaud has been, a legend, as good as Peter Sullivan.
I wouldn't want to get too defensive about it. It's absolutely perfectly justifiable for people to critique the editorial.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, that's that. Why not?
But you don't turn off watching an event because of who's broadcast.
To relate a trend in viewing figures to the sort of surface presentation, if you like, I think is pretty bogus.
You're not a fan of sport.
And finally, gentlemen, we all know around this table in this room that a lot of TV presenters don't get to work on content or present programs they like, enjoy, or whatever. It's a working gig. It's a gig.
Yep.
You work on this. You work on Channel 4 Racing, and you love racing. I mean,
it's brilliant. I mean, that's why I said I don't want to. A lot of the questions you've asked are based on other people's perceptions of whatever. So
I asked one question on other people's perceptions, and you gentlemen ran with it. At great length, and I thank you for doing that. But fair point, Vern. Fairness to me.
But I did say I don't want to get too defensive.
I didn't come in here with a negative agenda.
Because we do have a lot of fun doing this.
We do have a lot of fun, but I do feel sometimes. Well, I get a bit defensive sometimes because ultimately everybody here works hard, to do the best we can, and we're doing the best we can with what we have, and it annoys me when people have a go at the whole team. Because they do so much hard work to try and put the best product out there. And we are lucky. We are lucky at what we do. I mean, I absolutely love working on horse racing. It's all I ever wanted to do. I had a row with my parents when I was 19 about working in. I said I wanted to work in racing, and my dad was a lawyer. My mum was a professional, and they both were so disappointed with my mum more than my dad. And I had a row because I wanted to work in racing. That's all I ever wanted to do. So I'm living out my dream.
Yeah.
But it does annoy me that other people who are working hard, perhaps people who aren't living out their dream and doing this as a job, they're getting criticised for stuff that's not within their power whatsoever. And that's sometimes when you asked that question earlier and I ran with it, or we ran with it, it's because I feel that they are wrongly unjust. It's unjust.
Also, Rishi's got more context than I have for this, but I think the team of people we work with is just exceptional.